Hello, everyone. I'm Cree from the ETH Global team. Super excited to have you here. We have Andrew from Aave. He is going to do his workshop on new frontiers for DeFi builders. Yeah, super stoked to have him here. He's done a few workshops for us in the past, and they're all really super good. And yeah, I think we will have maybe a short Q&A session at the end, probably like the last 5, maybe 10 minutes. So if you have any questions, feel free to just drop them in the chat box. Andrew will answer them towards the end. And then also, like, you're more than welcome if you think of a question later to just like raise your hand during the Q&A session as well. But if you're shy like me and you don't feel like asking a question in front of all these people, the Aave Discord is always open for you to drop your questions too. So, all right, Andrew, yeah, feel free to take it away.
Amazing. Thanks for the introduction. So yeah, my name is Andrew. I'm a full stack developer contributing to the Aave protocol. I've been there for just about 1.5 years, so seen a lot of things, and hopefully I can help sort of enlighten you guys about what I see as kind of the next frontiers for DeFi and the Aave protocol, and talk about the specific hackathon categories that we're highlighting here. So kind of a brief introduction. We're just going to go through building with Aave. A lot of this will probably be pretty general overview for people that are familiar with the protocol, but then I'll also give a lot of helpful tips for places to look if you get stuck on certain things. So there'll be a lot of good troubleshooting tips in that first section. And then the second section will be focused on kind of the new frontiers. So these are specific to the Aave protocol, but kind of apply to DeFi in general. So things such as stablecoin growth, social credit delegation using the Lens protocol, increasing accessibility to DeFi and specifically Aave, Forex tooling, making more efficient markets, and then transaction building, enabling people to do things that they've never been able to do before. So jumping right in, what is Aave? So Aave is a DeFi protocol. It was created in 2017 as ETHLend, and then sort of rebranded to the Aave protocol when it relaunched in 2020. And it is a pooled model. So essentially there are 3 users in this system. So you have suppliers. These are people which are supplying their cryptocurrency to these pools, and the pools are allowing them to earn interest. And this interest comes from a market determined rate from borrowers. So anyone that has supplied liquidity is able to borrow in what's called an over-collateralized fashion. So you must always have more collateral on hand than the amount that you are borrowing. And what keeps the system in check is the third actor called the liquidator. So if someone has a borrowed position, but they do not have the collateral assets, they don't have the amount of collateral assets to support this borrow, then someone else can come in and repay their borrow position and claim a portion of their collateral plus a small premium. And this transaction is called a liquidation, and it's what keeps the Aave protocol over collateralized. So how do you kind of build on top of this? Well, the main entry point to the Aave ecosystem is this contract called the pool. In V2, this contract is called lending pool. In V3, it's just called pool. And this contract is where basically all of the core functionality of Aave lies. So this is where you are calling the functions supply, borrow, repay, withdraw, liquidate, flash loan, and all of these different kind of utilities like setting E mode. Basically any feature that exists on the Aave protocol is most likely facilitated through this contract. And if there are exceptions to that throughout the presentation, I will note them. But if you understand this contract and know the address and are able to interact with it, then really you have most of the tools to interact with the protocol. And then we also have NPM packages available. So these first 2 are contract packages. So these allow you to import the ABIs and the interfaces of Aave contracts directly into your own. So you don't have to worry about importing the ABIs manually. You can just do it with an import statement. And then we also have a very helpful JavaScript SDK, which will allow you to generate this transaction data through JavaScript. So instead of having to write a custom smart contract for these things, you could just write one front end that then is calling the supply function. And the contract helpers is not just for pool functions. This has functions for things like E mode and credit delegation, and also for formatting data, which we'll get to in a little bit. So there really is a lot of functionality here that's, if you're trying to integrate Aave into any sort of JavaScript application, I would highly recommend checking out this JavaScript SDK. And then also one other thing I'll pitch is the Aave Sandbox. So one really helpful thing in the world of blockchain is testing on what's called a fork network. So this is a clone of your production networks like Ethereum mainnet or Polygon, and it lets you interact with them for free. So you don't have to pay any gas fees. You don't have to worry about having tokens in your wallet or having permissions to call certain functions. You can basically turn yourself into a super user and add different assets, test different functionality. This is just a really helpful tool built on top of Hardhat to fork the Aave protocol contracts and sort of test out your own logic. And then these next two will be about data. So if you want to build an interface which is displaying some data about the protocol, obviously you can query the smart contracts directly and format the data yourselves. But this is quite cumbersome. Like there's no point in reinventing the wheel. The Aave front end already exists. These functions are being used in production. So, we have all of these available, open source, available for you to use. And again, this is in the Aave utilities package. So basically the two main pieces that comprise the Aave front end are these two contracts. The UI pool data provider, which is basically all of the reserve data and all of the user data for the protocol. And then incentives it's what it sounds like, the incentives of the protocol. So if there is a token being emitted, say the Optimism network is incentivizing liquidity there and they're giving out their OP token, this contract would be able to query and fetch all of the available rewards on that market and also query each user's individual balance that they are able to claim. And there's functions for calling these inside of the SDK. And then once you do get this data, a lot of times it's helpful to format it. Data coming from the blockchain is not necessarily the most human readable. So if you want to format things with proper decimals and get USD prices for everything, we also expose through this SDK these formatting functions, which are used on the Aave interface to display all of the live data about the protocol. And yeah, these two functions right here are all you need to fetch basically all of the data that's displayed on the Aave interface. And then when it comes to historical data, so the main method at the moment for accessing historical data is through what's called the protocol subgraphs. So each Aave contract, whenever you do a transaction, it emits an event, and then the subgraphs index these events and then expose a GraphQL endpoint, which you can consume from your applications. So there's a subgraph deployed for every Aave V2 and V3 production market. So if you're interested in accessing historical data there, that's a way that you can do that. So that's kind of a brief intro into kind of what the protocol is and like rapid fire how to get started with it. And now I'm kind of diving into the new frontiers section. So with Aave, with this hackathon, we really wanted to sort of change how we are approaching, encouraging the community to build these different ideas. And so we wanted to be very specific this time and give people these actionable ideas that they can run with. And so that they know that if they're building a project in this certain area, that this is something worth pursuing, that this is something that they can earn a prize for, and that it's something that, the grants DAO has seen as a need for the community. So these are the 5 categories that I mentioned in the intro. And for each of these, we're offering $3,000 for the first place entry and $1,000 to the second place entry. Ideally, we hope to give out unique prizes for everything, but if there is, a specific application that qualifies for multiple prizes, that could potentially be an option as well. So diving into each category individually, so these categories are meant to represent kind of the frontiers that DeFi will probably be facing in the next 5 to 10 years, long time horizons. So stablecoins are expected to play a major role in blockchain commerce. Anytime you think about a transaction, generally you're going to price it in a stablecoin. And so it makes the most sense that if you're going to facilitate payments, that it's going to happen in these stablecoins. And so Aave allows users to supply these stablecoins in a non-custodial manner. This means you are not giving your tokens to a centralized entity. You are supplying your funds to a contract, which is controlled by code and has a system of governance in place to manage these contracts and handle the risk of the system. So it's very different than the typical way that you would earn interest on assets. It's completely permissionless. So any application which involves stablecoins is able to supply them to the Aave protocol. There is no restrictions there. And so I guess I didn't finish this point, but stablecoins are the most commonly borrowed asset as well, because it makes for a very good unit of account. If you know you want to track your portfolio balance in stablecoins, then it makes the most sense to borrow stablecoins so that you can sort of maintain this price stability. And so for this prize category, the description was about increasing stablecoin liquidity in the protocol. So this could be basically any way that you are supplying stablecoins to the protocol or borrowing stablecoins from the protocol, or there are a lot of different types of stablecoins out there, over collateralized and algorithmic. And so there's a lot of different use cases. For one use case, you might want to hold one stablecoin, but for another, you might want something different. So basically any sort of use case that you can think of that would increase the user experience of people with stablecoins in the Aave ecosystem would definitely be qualified for this frontier. And sort of moving to the next one, we have social credit delegation. So credit delegation is a really interesting feature. It allows users who have unused collateral in the Aave protocol. So if I've supplied some DAI as collateral, but I haven't borrowed anything yet, with credit delegation, I could actually take this unused borrowing power and delegate it to somebody else to borrow on my behalf. And what this allows is you could create this system where instead of paying interest, instead of paying 5% to borrow an asset, you could actually flip this around and earn interest on your borrowing power by delegating it to someone who will pay the interest on your behalf plus a premium. And so this could be a really powerful primitive that allows people to earn both on the supply and borrow side of the Aave protocol. But the difficulty with this is that it relies on having a trusted counterparty. So you have to trust that the entity you are delegating your credit to is eventually going to repay this position. And so you either have to trust the person directly or build some system of smart contracts which handles the trust in some sort of algorithmic fashion. And what we were pitching for this hackathon is the idea of using social data for this application. And this is where the Lens protocol comes in. So for those that aren't familiar, the Lens protocol is a social graph. So this is meant to serve as the backend for Web3 social applications. So instead of having one centralized database that a company like Facebook or Twitter has complete unilateral control over, the Lens protocol lets you actually own your posts and your profiles and your followers as NFTs inside of your wallet. And by storing all of this data on chain, it enables this next frontier, which is called SocialFi. So this is using social data to create a financial policy. So when you have social data on the blockchain, and you also have applications that allow financial transactions on the blockchain, well, you can think of some really interesting use cases of combining these. And the example I gave of earning on your delegated credit is just one example. So you could assess the reputation of one Lens profile or say a group of Lens profiles, and then have some interface for delegating your credit based off of that. So I know this is this might be probably the biggest of all of the frontiers. And so I would say, definitely do not focus on building a complete scoped out solution. If I were to give a recommendation for this project would be to start small, build some aspect, either the reputation aspect or the delegation aspect, and then try to build from there. I would not recommend trying to build an entire delegation marketplace at once. That might be a bit much for a hackathon. But as for the technical side of credit delegation, since this does not go directly for the pool contract, I figured I'd kind of go in depth here. So there's two main functions for credit delegation. There's one called approved delegation, which is called on the debt token contract. So if you wanted to delegate a balance of DAI, you would actually call on the variable debt DAI contract approved delegation, and then you would pass in the address of the user that you want to delegate to. And then once you have access to credit, you can call the borrow function on the pool contract. This is the same function that you would use normally. The only difference is that you will pass in one extra parameter, which is the on behalf of address. And that's the address that delegated the credit to you. And also the utilities SDK exposes this in JavaScript format as well. So you can use that. And then for help with Lens integrations, you can check out the Lens Garden. So the primary interface with the Lens protocol is actually the Lens API. So Lens offers a free API which you can query any of this data through your applications. So I would definitely check out the Lens Garden, and also there is the Lens Discord, and there's also a Lens channel in the ETHOnline Discord. So lots of opportunities to get help with Lens and people available to help you there. The third frontier, which we'll talk about, is accessibility. So this is definitely the most broad of the frontiers. But currently, the total landscape of DeFi is a very, very, very small set of the potential users. Maybe max, 250,000 users across, these DeFi applications on Ethereum. So there are tons of underserved groups and ways that people could interact with these protocols that aren't currently happening. So for this frontier, the idea is to sponsor some way for people to create new ways to interact with the protocol. This could be anything. So this could be a new interface. I gave an example of an interface for non-DeFi native users. So maybe if you don't understand what a wallet is, what an RPC is, what a transaction is, what gas is, these are all things which are kind of assumed knowledge when you come into this space. And really breaking down those barriers to entry is going to be like one of the big challenges of DeFi coming forward. And then the other thing I gave was creating an interface that just does something novel. So the Aave protocol exposes all of these different functions on the smart contracts. We've gone through supply and borrow and the credit delegation features. This is just scraping the surface of the contracts. And primarily, the app.aave.com has served as kind of the primary interface for the protocol. But because the protocol is completely decentralized, any interface could interact with these contracts. And so kind of with this prize category, we're hoping to inspire is sort of developments that go beyond app.aave.com. Maybe it's something that seems like a super small, insignificant feature, but it's something that you think would improve your experience as an Aave user. This is definitely something that could be in the scope of accessibility. And then on the next category is specifically on Forex markets. So this kind of ties in with like the stablecoins category a bit, but we wanted to sort of specify here is sort of the trading aspect. So with Forex markets, with the Aave protocol, you're really able to fine tune your exposure to these markets. So by having the access to supply and borrow these wide variety of tokens, you can really customize your long and short exposure to these assets. And so with this sort of frontier, the idea is to sort of expand the potential for users to take advantage of these features. So the three that I gave here were eMode, flash loans, and external integrations. So kind of talk about each individually. So eMode is a feature in Aave version 3, which allows users to borrow up to a higher collateralization ratio. So maybe you were only able to borrow up to 80% of your collateral value without eMode. With eMode, that might go up to say 97%. So you're able to get far more exposure, borrow exposure against your collateral. And this could be extremely useful for Forex markets where you want to speculate on the price action of an asset. And then flash loans, I'd say the main utility for this with respect to Forex would be sort of migration tools. So if you want to switch your exposure from one asset to another, you could very easily do that with flash loans without having to unwind your position. And other DeFi integrations such as Curve. So Curve.fi is an automated market maker. And they offer extremely low slippage trades, optimized for these stable coins and Forex markets. So sort of combining or utilizing any one of these features to improve the quality of life for people that want to sort of access these assets is sort of the goal of this frontier. And then the final one, and then I'll open it up for questions after this, is transaction building. So this kind of builds on everything that we've talked about before, which is creating a routing contract. So basically a contract which you're not just calling Aave directly, you're providing something on top of it. So this could be like building a contract that is supplying funds and then borrowing and then resupplying all in the same transaction, or doing something like taking a flash loan to migrate assets from one market to another. There's lots of different transactions and combinations of transactions that are possible to build with the protocol, which just currently there's not great user interfaces for. So the idea with this frontier is to enable new ways for people to build and use transactions. So again, instead of just going to app.aave.com or to Etherscan and calling the supply function, you could do some really interesting logic that calls this function under the hood and does other things as well. So I would say this one is also very open-ended. The idea of creating a routing contract and doing this transaction building is kind of what the intention is, but there could be a lot of different projects that I would say could potentially fall under transaction building. Even things that kind of tie into accessibility. So just new ways to call these transactions. So yeah, those are kind of the frontiers that the Aave Grants DAO wanted to highlight as things that are needs within the Aave community and things that are able to be built on top of the protocol. And so we have two more resources here. The developer docs are a great place to start for Aave. These will go through the individual contracts and also give you a bit more resources about kind of the gotchas of different functions. So for example, if you want to call the supply function, you need to approve the tokens beforehand. So these are the types of things that are gone through in detail in the developer docs, walking through these specific actions. And then even if you do not win a hackathon prize, absolutely, we definitely want to encourage you to keep building these project ideas. ETH Global Hackathons are stacked. From personal experience, I can tell you that the quality of projects at these events is incredible. And even if you do not win a prize, that does not mean that your project is not good and not worth pursuing. So definitely feel free to reach out to the Aave Grants DAO and also in the Aave Discord to get feedback on your ideas and figure out how you can keep building these things and turn them into these polished applications. So yeah, with that, that's about all I have today. I do apologize if I went through that pretty quick. I noticed I kind of sped through some of those sections, but I have about 7 minutes now. So I see there are some questions in the chats. We got some GMs. Okay, so will Andrew send the slide deck? I think I can publish this deck after the talk. I'm not sure where I will publish that, but I guess I will send a follow-up in the ETHOnline Discord channel about those slides. So where is the debt token contract for Aave? So inside of the Aave docs, right at the very top of the page, you will see a row which is called deployed contracts. And if you click on this, each Aave market will have the debt tokens listed. So for example, if you're on the Aave V2, like Ethereum market, if you click on that deployed contracts page, there will be a list of here is all the tokens, and then you can click individually on the debt tokens. Is there a plan for office hours? That's definitely something we can try to do, especially given that this hackathon is a bit more extended in length. So yeah, we can try to set something up in the next couple of weeks for that. And can we qualify for more than one category? I would say, ideally, our goal is to sponsor as many projects as possible. So ideally, we'd like to give one prize per project, but if there is something that stands out in multiple categories, then certainly that could be eligible. Hello, I heard that there might be a possibility to use NFTs as collateral. Is this a feature being worked on? So this is definitely something being researched, both within Aave and also in the ecosystem as a whole. There are a lot of different approaches to this problem. it has a very different set of constraints and challenges as opposed to doing it for the standard ERC20 tokens, which is what the Aave protocol does. But there are certainly like ways that you could apply the same structure of the Aave protocol or different, DeFi protocols in general to NFTs. And I definitely think this is another frontier probably that you'll see like developed. So yeah, if that's something that you're interested in looking into, yeah, definitely reach out in the Aave Discord to ping ideas off of.
Great. I think, yeah, if you have any last minute questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I think you answered them all though, so we should be good. But yeah, and if you think of a question later that you would like to ask Andrew or from the Aave team, oh, I think we have one more actually, if we have time.
Yep. So I see, if I do the social credit use case, does it get added to the same liquidity pool, isolated liquidity? That's a very good question. So it is supplied to the same liquidity pool. So if you were to supply USDC and then delegate that credit, that USDC is still in the same pool as everybody else's USDC. The only difference is that you are now giving access to this one address that you've delegated your credit to and saying this particular user is able to borrow on behalf of me, on behalf of my liquidity. So it's not actually a segregated pool. It's basically just one function that says, is this user allowed to borrow on behalf of this other user? And that's kind of how the credit delegation works.
Okay, awesome. Thanks everyone for coming. Again, if you have any more questions, feel free to drop them in the Aave Discord channel. Again, Andrew, you're so amazing. Thanks so much for hosting this workshop. And yeah, this will be posted to YouTube later in the site. So feel free to rewatch it if you need. All right. Thanks everyone for coming.
Amazing. Thanks for having me.